Well, we're gonna get started here. Good morning, everyone. If you're in the US, we have a lot of participants, a lot of them from overseas. Thank you, everyone, for registering and attending this webinar. Particularly, thank you for those that are making extra effort and watching this outside of their working hours. We have a lot of registrants from overseas. So today's webinar is titled Seeing the Subsurface of a Contaminated Site. There's an extra official title called Opening Your Eyes to Subsurface Contamination. My name is Julio Cimbron. I've been working on NAPL visualization for close to 20 years now, and I started doing some lab experiments and for flow visualization and ultimately developing this tool that is now used at sites. What we do mostly here at E-Flux, I founded this company about 14 years ago, and what we do is provide measurements of natural source on depletion rates based on the fact that the end product of contaminant degradation is CO2. So we have a respiration test that is radiocarbon corrected. And basically the idea is that if we quantify the rate of production of all carbon CO2 from the ground, we can back calculate the degradation rate of the contaminants. Today, I'm going to be talking about a different project. This is a more recent project. It's about subsurface contamination and NAPL identification in the ground. So I'm going to get started here. It's about 3 minutes after the hour. And in this talk, I will be describing some physical models that I've been lucky enough to work with that have informed my conceptual side model of LNAPL mobility and distributions in the ground. And I will be discussing some basic concepts of multi-phase flow. And also why the LNAPL distributions are important for the conceptual side model. And ultimately, discussing some of the tools to assess LNAPL distributions. So I talked about physical models, and it sounds fancy, but I started with a fish tank that when I was working at CSU as a researcher, we basically had to get a fish tank out of the basement. And but the idea here is that you take some way of viewing the subsurface through the glass. And a tank is ideal for that. You fill the tank with sand of different sizes or soils, and then you simulate an oil spill. In this particular case, after some of the initial pictures became famous, I got funding and we got a very nice, very fancy fish tank. So here we have the soil. In this case, we were modeling the contact of the soil with surface water. This is surface water that was stained with a green dye, and we were changing the level of the surface water to see what happened to the contamination. So after you have set this up, you do your spill on the left and watch the contaminant go. And this is in a dark room. I was using some UV lights and some digital cameras to record what was happening, making time-lapse movies. And let's see some of the things that I learned through this experience. One of these pictures is shown right here. This is a very slow NAPL spill. The contaminant shows with this orange, pink, yellowish, bright color when exposed to the UV lights. And I put a simulated monitoring well here. I split a well screen and I tucked against the window and I put some sand packing material, which is these larger pores, and this is the formation. So the formation was showing a very nice, relatively uniformly distributed distribution of the contaminant. But when a single stringer of contaminant hit the packing material, it started running towards the monitoring well. This picture is from the API, the American Petroleum Institute, guidance on LNAPL. It's called the FAQ document. It's available online. And, the point of this picture is that the monitoring well shows very limited information, and that information is very hard to interpret with respect to what is happening in the formation. So if you can picture this a few moments earlier before the runner started hitting the monitoring screen, this screen was clean, and basically there was the same amount of contaminant in the formation. So before I proceed here, I have a set of polling questions. The permeability of porous media to a certain fluid increases with A, saturation of that same fluid, B, saturation of another fluid, and C, none of the above. So this is just to probe, what are your preconceived ideas about this concept. I'm starting to get some answers here. Thank you for responding that. And I think we're clearly seeing a winner here. Some people are saying that it's the soil saturation of the same fluid, and that is correct. So the more contaminant there is, the higher the permeability of the soil to that contaminant. So I'm gonna wait a second here, but 80% of the people answer that. So the pre-wetness of the soil to a certain fluid is a requirement for the fluid to continue to move through those paths. That's the way of looking at this. So here's another experiment. This is another fish tank experiment. We have a lot of the bulk of the soil was this relatively large size sand, and then I had these lenses of a smaller grain size sand, size 80, 20 to 40, 80 right here. And what you will see is the effect, and this is a contaminant right here. So the contaminant has reached this point, and we're going to see what happens when the groundwater levels go up and down. The water level is going up, and the contaminant tries to keep up. And then the water goes down, and the contaminant floats on top of that water table. When it goes up, it redistributes itself. You can see this redistribution in the pores. One thing that is pretty shocking is that the contaminant won't go into those low permeability zones. And the reason is that these low permeability zones are, let me stop this at a zone right here. So this clearly is going up because this contaminant is broken down through the height of the water column, but when it hits this lens of finer material, it cannot penetrate it. The reason is that this water material had been pre-wet with water, and it doesn't release that water quickly. So these lenses remain saturated with water, and the contaminant has a hard time penetrating those pores that are already filled with water. So here's another sand tank experiment. In this sand tank experiment, we have coarse sand here in contact with a monitoring well screen. We have a sand packing around the monitoring well screen. We have medium sand, the bulk of the matrix, and we have fine sand here. And again, what you will see, this is a picture under white lights, but the next picture will show you how it looks under UV lights. So it's the same media, but now you're seeing the contaminant because that's revealing what fluoresces, which is the contaminant. Here again, the fine sand is clean. And let's see what happens when the water table goes up and down. So the water table is going up and down. It's pushing the contaminant towards the packing material. So the thickness in the well increases as the water table is going down. Now the water table is going, as the water table is going up. When the water table is going down, Now this thickness decreases. I'm going to play this again because you will see now how this contaminant is trying to go up. It does it with some success in the medium sand, but definitely in the fine sand, it cannot penetrate it. So this fine sand is acting as confining layer, and it's forcing this contaminant under pressure now to shoot through the monitoring well. And in the previous example, when the water table was, if you don't have, if you have a coarse sand here and the water table is going down, the contaminants store in the formation and they don't go, there's less contaminant to go into the monitoring well. So the trend of thickness in the monitoring well with water table elevations is the opposite if you don't have confining layers. And that is the reason why it's so difficult to interpret these levels, because when you have a monitoring well, you only have a view of this central part. You don't really have a good understanding of the lithology unless you have really good monitoring logs. You sometimes don't have details about the monitoring well construction. And you can see opposite trends for the same effects. So this is really a matrix that says that under unconfined conditions, the LNAPL thickness is low at high water table, but high at low water table, and the opposite trends are observed in the example that I just showed in the previous video. So I'm going to move on to the second polling question, and the question is the definition of mobile NAPL. Mobile NAPL is one that A, can drain on a well. Let's see. So I'm launching the second question. There's two questions on that what you will see on the screen only answer the first one. I made a mistake and I added two questions. So the first definition says the mobile NAPL can drain on a well. The second one is above the residual saturation. C is not surrounded by water. And we're getting a lot of answers. Thank you for answering this. The overwhelming response is, well, some people are saying it can drain on a well, and I think that that is intuitively correct. But I think that the definition of mobile NAPL has to do with residual saturation. The one thing that we will discuss in this presentation is that that only applies to unsaturated NAPL, and you will see why in a second. So I'm going to end the poll here, and I'm going to move through the presentation. You will see why that is. So right here, it is another one of the pictures that I took when I was at CSU. This is part of the 2018 ITRCL NAPL guidance document. There is a sheen, an appendix about sheens. And here we're showing the sheens that we're observing in these oil spills. So the sheen is a thin film of contaminant that is moving at the lowest saturated pore first, at the lowest pore that is filled with air, at the lowest water unsaturated pore. The water table here would be somewhere in here about, where this lower arrow is. But due to capillarity, the water rises and fills pores to a higher level than that. And what you see here is that there's two different behaviors. You have unsaturated behavior when the contaminant is in the presence of two other fluids, a total of three fluids, water, air, and contaminant. And you have a different behavior when the contaminant is surrounded by water. So here you have more contaminant, but it's immobile. So it's a higher than residual concentrations, but it's immobile. And you will see why in a second. I have a separate slide to do that. This is a video of that I took in that previous picture that is famous, and it's kind of cool watching these sheens develop. So Here I'm showing the spill on the right. That's you will see basically me pouring that contaminant and on the right, and then the contaminant and right there. There's that stream of diesel, and then it finds the water table. Some of it goes below the water table because of the high inertia that it fell with, but then you start seeing this sheen here. Um, and the mobility is mostly associated with the three-phase, which is the sheen right here. And these sheens move rather quickly in water. I believe that they took less than an hour for this to reach about from the source of the spill all the way to the left. In this case, I had created this screen to put this soil in contact with surface water so I could see the sheen in the surface water, which we will see in the end of the video. And here you can see first how the sheens develop first as a hairline. Then it's hard to see even if it's there. It's like a windshield crack that it's hard to see initially, but then it thickens and ultimately it's pretty obvious that it's there. And pretty neatly, it reveals the size and distribution of pores in the sand. Right here, I believe I'm going to show this view of the sheen in the end. And it took about an hour to go across that, but ultimately it showed up as a sheen in surface water. So this is just to repeat the concept that is whenever you're looking at an apple, you need to be aware whether or not it's surrounded by water only, that's two-phase behavior, or if it's surrounded by air. And you will see that repeated in this presentation over and over. So I said that I was going to mention some basics of multi-phase flow. Here is a picture, and what you're seeing here, it's a contaminant that is dyed in green, and you see the distribution here. And the distribution is following these contours made by the pores. So this is the shape and size of the pores, and the pore is the widest part of the voids. However, where there's different soil particles, you have what is known as a pore throat. And in saturated, otherwise two-phase conditions, in other words, an apple is surrounded by water, the L-NAPL has to exceed the pore throat displacement pressure. And that is a very high value. And the only way that we have to manipulate pressures in the ground is through hydraulic gradients. And to achieve a hydraulic gradient that makes this NAPL flow through this pore throat, you will have groundwater velocities that are unrealistically high. We don't see those groundwater velocities. And that's the reason why NAPL under two-phase conditions is mostly immobile. Now, there's some people that can manipulate these conditions with additives, and that is possible. I don't know particularly what the effect of that is, but this displacement pressure does depend on these surface tensions between different phases, and those can be manipulated. So here is the concept of unsaturated distributions of water in the ground. This is the there's basically the Brooks-Corey equation and the Van Genupten equation, and those are two mathematical descriptions of this shape. I mentioned that the water table is here at where the fluid pressure is at zero pressure, zero relative pressure, in other words, ambient pressure. This is the water table in other words. And you have this elevation in which the soil is basically saturated with water. That's the capillary rise. And then as you go higher than that, you get lower and lower saturations. So this is water only. Now, when you add another fluid, this additional fluid, which is NAPL, it runs over the water saturation curve, and this is the water plus NAPL saturation curve. In other words, the NAPL is trying to coat the water with this characteristic thickness. Now, one thing to be aware of is that this is a concept of equilibrium. In other words, the NAPL has all the time in the world to create this curve, but at the same rate, the NAPL also has the ability to go sideways. So mostly the NAPL is going to try to fill up all the pores at this lower part of the curve and spread out laterally before it starts spreading upward. So equilibrium conditions are not always common in groundwater. Why is it important to look at NAPL distributions? This is really my personal take. This is not coming straight out of any guidance document, but I believe that this is consistent with those guidance documents. So the things that drive risks for NAPL have to do with these keywords: NAPL mobility, the reactivity, the composition, the effectiveness of mass removal remedies, and the degradation rates based on natural processes, also known as natural source and depletion. Well, it turns out that all of these are directly related to how the NAPL is distributed in the ground. So understanding your vertical L-NAPL distributions and how they change is very important for the conceptual side model. So I'm going to switch gears here, and I'm going to start talking about this concept of high-resolution site characterization tools. There's this website, I believe this is managed by the EPA, and basically the EPA says that you have to measure at the relevant scale. And the relevant scale typically requires a higher data density than the one that you would get from some of the traditional tools, such as monitoring wells. There's another take at some of these tools. The ITRC view lumps these tools into something that they call advanced site characterization tools. And it classifies them as direct sensing, borehole geophysics, subsurface geophysics, and remote sensing. I don't know much about remote sensing. Most of the ones that I'm familiar with are direct sensing. This is a list of all the available tools, of at least some of them. And I highlighted the ones that are targeted to contaminants themselves. Membrane interface probe, they poke the hole, the ground with a probe that carries gas, and the gas goes in a loop and comes back to the surface where it's analyzed by a gas chromatograph. There's laser-induced fluorescence and OIP. Both of these excite the ground with UV lights and will record the optical response of the contaminants under fluorescence, similar to what you were seeing in the videos that I showed. Compenetrometer test records the force required to push the probe in the ground, which is related to the hydraulic conductivity. And there's a bunch of these tools. So, the theme here is that a lot of the tools that are targeted to NAPL are probe mounted, and they are designed to be used one time. So they poke the ground, they collect the data, and it's very rare that they come back and repeat the survey. Here, I'm going to do my third poll question, and about what is the biggest effect on NAPL mobility in the ground? A, hydraulic gradients or Darcy's law. B, surface tension forces. And C, whether the soil is water saturated or not. So let's see the responses here. Okay. So this is great because things have changed quite a bit. Right now, the least common answer is the first one, which is hydraulic gradients or Darcy's law, and that is correct. The sheens that you saw to be spreading really can go even against hydraulic gradients. So Darcy's law is not a big driver here. The bigger driver is, I would say, number C, the saturation of soil, and I think I'm glad to see that because that's I believe that is consistent with what we see. Now, once you're in saturated media, then surface tension ports will basically drive that saturation curve that I showed you. So I'm gonna end the poll here. Thank you for submitting your responses. So this is one of the tools. This is laser-induced fluorescence. This is a probe that pokes the ground. They excite the surface, the soil with a very strong signal with UV light. So this from a laser, and they shine the soil through a sapphire window. And then if there's contaminants, they will fluoresce. And here, there's different contaminants. Different contaminants will show a different response. And basically, the color of the contaminant will be different. And we are seeing some of that in our data. And basically, if you know this pattern, you can attribute this pattern to particular contaminants, such as diesel, kerosene, and others. The OIP is a similar version. They're showing here electrical conductivity next to fluorescence. And here is the fluorescence signal. This is taken from the geoprobe site. And you can see here that the electrical conductivity is the lowest, and it's because they have very tight soils and the contaminants associated with the interface is basically perched on that fine soil. These are the pictures that they capture, and upon some data processing, this is what they think it is contaminated. So I kept thinking about these tools, and these tools have been extremely useful. They really have improved the conceptual side model, but I kept thinking that these pictures had something that these other tools didn't have. So I developed this new tool. This is the back of the napkin sketch of how I envision this happening. You basically have your fish tank, and you have your El Napo spill here in orange. And what you do is you create a port in the ground that is small enough for miniaturized versions of LEDs and cameras to go in there. And that's really how it started. That was about 14 years ago when I became independent and I created E-Flux. And now I'm going to show you how the current version. So fast forward 14 years, and now we have this tool that you can fit in a piece of luggage that you can carry with you on your flight. It has 12 megapixel cameras. We take about 1 picture per inch. And we can see things that are about the thickness of a human hair, about 15 microns. We have multi-spectral lights. We excite the ground with up to 5 different LEDs. And the cool thing is that once you have done this installation with your permanent port in the ground, you can repeat your surveys with a portable instrument. So this is a short video of the instrument. This is a previous version of the instrument. This is not a real field installation, but this shows how the probe goes down to a certain depth and starts taking pictures. The video is low quality, but here we have some lights. Right now it's taking a picture with white lights, and then it switches to UV lights, and it moves down once again, and it monitors and it surveys the entire interval that is lined with Pyrex glass. So this is how it looks. These are the field installations. In fact, this is the first version of the installation. This is our first ever installation at the Miji site. This is traditional PVC casing, and it has these sections in which 5-foot long sections of clear borosilicate glass are exposed through cuts in the glass. We can stack multiple of these, and these get installed with traditional direct push instruments, direct push tools. And once you have your hollow hole in the ground, you drop your hardware, and then the tool retracts, and the formation is intended to collapse around the installation. And once you have the installation, you monitor. This is not as pretty as the last version that you saw, but in principle, it does the same thing. It's a spooled cable that lowers the probe to do the survey. These are some of the specifications. The well casing materials is 2.5 inches standard PVC casing, schedule 80. The connections are threaded. The outer diameter is a little under 3 inches. It's installed with direct push tools using disposable tips. And the surface installation, it's a custom stick-up. We typically want 1 to 4 feet, so you can mount the instrument on top of it, and you can basically use it when you're standing up at waist level. These are some of the results that we're getting. These are actual field data. Right here, it's a short section. It's about 6 inches only. We take 2 pictures per inch. Here's the cable with a probe, and the probe is taking pictures of the soil. Here's a series of pictures of the actual soil with white lights. And next to it, we have the same position of the camera, but a picture taken with UV lights. Here we have close-ups. One of the things that is challenging is really trying to look at this at 2 different scales. You're looking at chunks of soil 5 foot long, but at the same token, you have a resolution where you can see human hairs. Right here is a 1 millimeter scale right here, 4 millimeter total right here. And on the white lights, we were seeing amazingly interesting stuff. We were seeing roots, we were seeing bubbles of gas, we were seeing different types of soils. Here we had clays and we had fine sands over here. These dark spots, it's actually the weathered petroleum at site. And when you put this same chunk of soil under UV lights, you have the same features, but now really looking at it from a different angle. Being the new light. Now we're seeing the detailed distribution of the contaminant. We're seeing these thin films or sheens. And just as importantly, we can repeat this survey at will. We have repeated this at will, and I'm going to show some of those results to you in a second. Now, one thing that we do is we take the UV signal. Well, we take individual pictures and we paste them together. We straighten them up with our software because you're taking a picture of a cylindrical glass, so there's a deformation. We recover the original rectangular geometry, and then we paste them together with our software, and then we decide what is contaminant. So right here, based on this picture, it's pretty obvious what is contaminant. Right here, these thin films are sheens, and that's contaminant. So we run this by a software that I call a binarizer. Everything that has NAPL becomes white or a numerical value of 1. And what doesn't have NAPL, such as this right here, it becomes black or with a numerical value of 0. And then you average ones and zeros horizontally, and you get this NAPL saturation profile. And these are the saturation profiles that are in concept similar to what other tools such as LIF or OIP report. This is the NAPL saturation profile. Here we see zones that have as much as 33% of the pixels are filled with NAPL. So let's see, let's move forward here. This is a close-up picture again. This is not even the highest resolution. Right here are the roots that I was mentioning. There's more the root structure right here. And well, some of the other features that I already talked about. This is a large bubble here, probably caused by the biodegradation of the contaminant. This is biogas. What we have found is that these have a high content of methane. So the motivation for this tool was really to provide some of that high resolution data that I was seeing in pictures, but not only that, but to make that repeatable. And you know, the answer is so the question that I was trying to answer was, can optical HRSC tools become dynamic? And I think we have demonstrated that is the case. Um, and before I continue here, we have our last polling question. Um, Let me share that with you. So the question is, if the water table rises, the napple thickness in wells increases, B decreases, or C it depends. Let's see. Okay. Okay, great. I am very happy. The answer, the overwhelming answer is it depends. And I'm so happy that people answer that because this response would be hard to get a few years ago. So it means that these concepts are becoming um, more common and people are getting a better conceptual side model and they're aware, more aware of the intricacies of interpreting results from monitoring wells. So yes, the answer is it depends. As I mentioned before, if you have saturated and confining aquifer, the results are opposite that if you don't have a confining aquifer, if the conditions are unconfined. So thank you for answering that. So let me go here, proceed with the presentation. Um, this is I'm sorry, this is a repeated slide. Actually, it's the one that I just showed. It's a little simpler. Um, but I already talked about this, so I'm gonna skip through this. Um, these are some results that we got from the field. From the field, we got cores, and we extracted the cores and measure the volume of the extract, and this is the shape of the volume of the extract. Um, and this is the shape of what we were seeing into our image-based saturations shortly after the well installation. So yes, you know the results from our imaging tool match those of the core analysis. Now, I took some assumptions here, the napple density and an assumed constant porosity, which might not be very realistic, but you know, I didn't have we have a large budget for this project, so it's semi-quantitative, but it follows in general the shape of these imaging based napple saturations. So these are the results from the three different surveys. This is the December 23, July 24, and about a year ago, October 24. I believe we have more of these. But interestingly, this is the same section of soil in every survey. Of course, the surveys now are on their side because they are long, so you know that matches the geometry of the screen better. In each survey, we have first the visible light survey, then we have the UV light survey. Here I'm showing the results of the binarization right here. And then we have the contaminant concentration profiles. And what you can see here is that the contaminant concentration profile right here in this section is entirely different from 2023 to 2024. The reason here is that there has been a recharge. The water table has remained amazingly constant on this site, but there's recharge from snowmelt. And that is changing the soil saturation profiles of water, and that is causing I believe that is what is causing this redistribution of contaminants. This is a different site. These are also two different surveys. In March 2024 and November 2024, we have different portions of the soil where we see more interesting stuff here. But later, a few months later, things have redistributed here. So here's the concentration profile where we see the most contaminant, and you see that it has going down at this location. This is a close-up of one of those locations. This is um, the one of the earlier surveys in white light images. Here we have a bunch of clay surrounded by fine sand. And you see here that there's distribution of the contaminant here um, that changes with time. So here you see these large cracks that have filled up with oil, with napple. But the napple has redistributed itself a few months afterwards. So this is a video of basically the same location. Here's again, we see the clay. We have this napple here that is obvious. There's this amber color. There's bubbles here. And when I play the video, you will see how it looks under UV lights in the first survey and a few months later. So this is another one of these pictures. This is one in which we had the roots, and we see a lot of details here. There's a lot of roots here. There's obviously some contaminant that can be seen under visible lights. Um, and this really is a before and after slide in which you see the same features, but now under the two different lights. So right here, there's a void here. There's a big bubble, and you see the extremely detailed distribution of contaminants within these bubbles. There's another bubble right here. Basically, you can pick any section of this picture and just see how it looks under both lights. Right here, there's a bubble. There's another bubble here. There's some tiny bubbles right here that you didn't even know were bubbles until you look at the UV light picture. So anyway, these pictures are truly addictive. You know, I can look at these pictures forever, and we have taken this about 2 years ago. We took this about 2 years ago, and it still catches my attention. This is a vertical survey. And I'm going to put the visible light on the left, the UV light on the right, and you will see how things look as the probe is going down into the ground. And you see some contrasts of the media here, right there. There's some coarse sand and there's some fine layers. And interestingly enough, the contaminant seems to be hanging around these contrasts of pore size, particularly when a smaller size finds smaller size material. And you know, you also can see some things that could be considered fluorescence, but it's in fact a soil feature right here. It's a chunk of white sand that could be mistaken as fluorescence, but it's not. And right here, you know, you see this little bubble right there filled up with a sheen. And it's because there's the three phases contaminants, even at depth on the saturated zone, because the microbes are creating this gas phase of methane. So this is one of the last series of pictures that I'm going to show you. This is a cool little lab experiment. We planted a basil plant on top of one of our soil columns that we have used for an experiment. And you will see the root growing here. And also, amazingly, we see different structures of the root. We have a different root branch right here on the left of the UV light. And you also see these very fine secondary root structures that are in the order of the thickness is like a human hair, and we can see those with extreme detail. This is a close-up of that same picture, so you can see what I'm talking about here. We see some of this here, you know, I'm wrapping up here. I want to leave time for some questions. What we have learned is that LNAPL distributions in soils are not static, they're dynamic. And monitoring well is the default tool to collect data in our industry, has large limitations to characterize discrete processes and also processes that change with time. The current HRSC tools have done a good job at providing higher data density in space, but they are rarely used repeatedly with time. And now we have this cool tool that can be deployed at will after the initial installation with a portable instrument. And This tool has the ability to add the time variability to HRSC surveys. These are some of the benefits of this tool. It requires a one-time mobilization, on-demand surveying. With every survey with UV lights, we also get the basically a bore log um, telling you where the particle size and types of soils are and site color and soil colors are. We are developing multiple UV wavelengths. And really the last thing is that one picture is worth 1,000 words. And there's something special about these pictures and how they allow us to understand processes at the pore level in a way that I don't think I have seen anything from any other tool. So if you want to learn more, we have this peer-reviewed paper. It's available at this link. If you have any trouble finding it, send me an email and I will share that with you. And before I open the door for questions, we have a webinar in about 3 weeks, the week of Thanksgiving, the Tuesday. And I'll be talking about a critical discussion on NSCD measurement variability. This is based on a paper that I got accepted recently at the last Lost Line journal. But I'm going to be exploring why these rates vary so much and really try to frame this in the LNAPL conceptual model. What are the inherent traits of the model that will cause variability with time and space, and also how the different methods address this. So having said that, this is my contact information, and I'll open the door for questions. If you can send your questions, I will try to answer. We have about 13 minutes for Q&A. First question. Thank you for sending that question. It says, will you make this presentation available to view offline? Yes, that is my intention. Our best practice is to put these webinars on our website. I haven't been very diligent about it, but yes, this is being recorded and will be available online. Okay, so second question, how long, I assume, does it take to complete a survey for a typical way, say 10 feet total depth? Does it have to be dry well? It takes about 2 hours to complete 10 feet in total depth. Does it have to be dry well? It's intended to be a dry well, but there's some tolerance for that. So the hardware that we put in the ground has these fittings that are intended to keep it dry. We have had those achieving some degree of failure, but it's not such that it keeps us from surveying. If there is some leakage into the dry well, it can be pumped dry before doing the survey. The probe itself is watertight, so it won't cause a failure of the probe. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. There's another comment. It was fantastic. Thank you so much for your comment. It has really been very rewarding seeing that this really is striking some appetite for people to have a better knowledge of the conceptual side model and think about different ways of collecting data. Thank you so much for your question. Another comment. Appreciate the information. Very interesting. No questions. Thank you so much for your comment again. Another comment rather than a question. Awesome video seeing Apple in a very different light. That is correct. You know, I took a class in grad school of multi-phase flow, and pretty early in the class, I was swamped with equations. And if anybody's has taken a similar class, a lot of that time is spent on Richard's equation, and the math is fun and is very relevant, but it's truly um, a benefit to have a conceptual side mobile, intuitively knowing what should be happening before starting running some models or equations. That is something that I'm very grateful for this project. This really has opened my eyes. Um, um, there's a last question here. Approximately how long does it take LNAPL to redistribute following the initial disturbance caused by well installation? That is an excellent question. Um, we don't know. The truth is we don't know, and I suspect that this is going to be depending on the pore size. So let me describe the well installation a little more. You have this hollow hole in the ground, stabilized with a drilling tool, and then you drop your materials, and then you retract the tool. The collapse can be variable. We have had collapse quickly right after the installation, and um, and I would say, but in some cases it has taken longer. Some cases has taken days, and some cases we're still waiting for that to happen. In fact, we are planning on. It didn't happen in a day, so we probably will allow it to stabilize for months. And I would say that the initial disturbance of the soil um, is significant, but it will recover, and the NAPL will initially go into different pores and different directions, but after that it will recover. So um, the disturbance of the measurement is something to be aware of, and something that always has to be in the background on the interpretation of results. But it's something that I would expect that to equilibrate in a matter of perhaps weeks. Um, Have you done before and after imaging to show the removal of the NAPL? That's an excellent question. Thank you so much for sending that question. We haven't done that. We have done that in the lab. We haven't got to a site in which a remedy has been implemented, but I think that this tool is ideally suitable for a performance, a remedy performance. So in other words, if you have a remedy in which you remove a lot of NAPL in a short time by, name your technology, this will be very valuable to really assess the effectiveness. I have talked to different vendors that offer mass removal remedies, and I asked them, so how much of the NAPL are you able to remove? And they tell me with a straight face, we can remove every last drop of NAPL at your site. And I'm like, wow, this person knows something I don't know. The Bemidji site included an assessment of how much was recoverable, and typically that was between 25 and 30% of the NAPL. So remedies are very difficult to implement, and I think that people that have this um, idea that you can extract 90 or 99 or 99.9% of the NAPL. Um, I would like to see the data that they use to make that assessment, but in my opinion, the fraction that is removable is much lower. So in a way, it's going to be using a tool like this is going to force people to open their eyes to what is realistic or not. But I think we're all better off if we look at better data and make decisions based on that data that rather than creating expectations that might not be supported by data. Do you foresee regulatory acceptance of the image data? That's a good question. I don't know. I'm getting a lot of encouragement from regulators. I think that ultimately good data will speak for itself. and I think that's what I am hoping. I don't know what the answer is to that, but that is really a key question. Um, um, uh, Another question right here is, have you used this technology next to a well with lingering napple to show the napple is not widespread or as thick as the well indicates? Yes, for most of the installations that we have done, um, there is a neighboring napple, and yes, it is. I think it'll vary side by side, location by location. I think I can foresee that there's a lot of these sites where you still have a lot of residual napple in the unsaturated zone that is really not going anywhere. And it's not affecting what is showing at the wells. Now, there could be another case in which you have a fair amount of napple, but it's in the saturated zone, and it's not mobile. It's if you have a monitoring well, the monitoring well might not be sensitive to it. Um, but yes, it's always interesting to compare the results of what we have with those of the NAPL. In fact, people are hoping to have a much better um, informed conceptual side model and be able to have a better handle of what really happens. This tool might I will add that this tool might not be really a good standalone tool. You know I it, it's better to have a tool like this that is high resolution built up on the previous conceptual side model. Your conceptual side model is built like a pyramid, and you need to look at the information you have, try to get your hypothesis formulated about what is happening at the site, and then decide what is the next layer of data that you want to collect. What are the key questions that you want to answer? And in that regard, you probably should look at your boring logs that you have at your site. What's the extent of the contamination. If you have already used some other high-resolution site characterization tools, um, things of that nature. And if you get to the point that you would like to see in more detail what is happening at discrete intervals of 5-foot sections each, then maybe would be a good fit for this tool. Another one would be this remedy performance. I think that would be ideal to show really what the mass removed, how it's linked to the Lappel distributions in the ground. But I can assure you that it's going to be very difficult that in the end you show very low uh, concentrations. There might be some extreme technologies that are very costly that can achieve 90 or 99% removal, and those would be very interesting to use too. I can think of thermal remediation. I was involved in evaluating that at a previous site early in my career, and it seems that the mass removal rate of that is very significant, and that might be a good idea to try to confirm that with a tool like this. The last comment here, I think we're also running out of time. Just a comment, this is eye-opening, and thank you for sharing your knowledge and work on this. Thanks so much. It makes my day when I hear comments like this. Um, um, if you want the slide deck, or if you're interested in the video recording for you or yourself or somebody that couldn't attend, let me know, and I'll be happy to share that. So for the time being, that's all I have. Thank you very much for your attendance and your questions, and hope to see you in a future webinar. Thank you very much. I'm now concluding this webinar.